Welcome everyone to the latest installment of the Schneider Downs Wealth Management Real Assets video. This is it's going to be an especially important episode, as you're going to see. We have our Oakmont Country Club coffee mugs. Sean and I are wearing our 125th US Open Oakmont polos. Pittsburgh's buzzing as the golf world descends today for the opening round of the US Open. So we're taping this on Thursday, June 12th. And what I would say is more important news than the start of what it was the 10th US Open to be held at Oakmont is the passing of the torch of the Real Assets video to Sean McCann from myself. I hope to be a frequent guest on the video, but Sean's going to be taking it over. Really excited for the future of this to take it to the next step, but ending it on one of my favorite things to do, which is golf. And really excited to be doing it on a sunny day in Pittsburgh, which we haven't had a lot. Really excited about what we're going to talk about today. Really excited for the future of this video series. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to the new host, my trusted colleague, Sean McCann.
Perfect. I appreciate that, Jason. So what I thought about what we could do for this episode, last episode, Megan and I talked about farmland, talked a little bit about timberland. So I thought what we could do is we could pivot and talk a little bit about infrastructure, another big theme within this real asset space. Obviously, it's summertime, you mentioned, we've got great weather here. And what I thought we could do, right, summertime, and a lot of people usually travel this time, we could think about our travels recently. You and I actually both got to go abroad over the last year or so. Mm-hmm. You were in Portugal, I think it was last year?
Yes, for my younger brother's wedding.
Yes, and then I was actually just in Norway and Denmark this past spring. So what I thought we could do is we could talk a little bit about what did we see on the infrastructure front with our own eyes, both abroad, and then kind of compare that back to home, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about U.S. infrastructure. And
sure.
We'll wrap it up. You know, when I was in Norway, the biggest thing that I noticed, first of all, that was there were no potholes on the highway. Right, a little bit more updated, a little bit of a smoother ride. You come into Pittsburgh, there are commonly a lot of potholes that at least I'm driving over. You know, we were able to take advantage of almost every mode of transportation when we were in Norway, right? We flew in there, right? Aviation. We were able to take high-speed rail to Oslo, and then actually we took a ferry at one point. So we got to see, not necessarily a port, but I like to kind of make that connection to a port. But the biggest thing that I noticed is that a lot of their infrastructure, it feels a lot more updated. It feels a lot more modern. It seems like there's a lot more investment going on in that space. And when I was actually able to talk to some locals, they actually take a lot of great pride in their infrastructure. And what I was wondering was, Jason, is when you were in Portugal and you were abroad, is that what you saw over there as well? Or what was your experience like?
Yeah, and I think I'll say the first experience, so we flew on a red eye from Pittsburgh to Heathrow. And I would say that the experience in Lisbon's airport was better than in Heathrow's. And maybe that's because we didn't have to go through customs. But I just felt like Lisbon's airport is actually run by a publicly traded company called Vinci. It's a French company, trades on the Paris Stock Exchange. And it's a privately run airport. And it felt that way. It was easy to get around. They had, if you spoke English, you went here. If you spoke Mandarin, you went there. If you spoke, they kind of had ways to kind of get you around it. I felt immediately at ease. My daughters, who at the time were 8 and 5, felt at ease. It was very easy to get along. And my wife, who God bless her, she has to deal with all of us and all the bags and everything, like that was an easy process. So I think from an efficiency standpoint, the Lisbon airport was run incredibly well. When you think about whether it's Brookfield or IFM, or some of these other large, infrastructure investors, they always say that kind of the private side can really kind of help foster these assets and kind of run them better than, let's just say the public sector can, right? Mm-hmm. Which I felt was the case. Lisbon does have an intercoastal, and there's a port there, and so you do see a lot of boats coming in and out. I think the interesting thing about Lisbon was that potholes, a lot of that is kind of cobblestone, very narrow streets. You're walking a lot. Yeah. The sidewalks were great. I still think New York City is the greatest city in the world, but there's garbage on the street in most places. Like none of that. None of that in Lisbon. I felt completely safe walking to coffee shops with my daughter. We would get up every morning and we'd go to the same one. And the coffee definitely tastes better over there. Just like that's like that's like the in the crops, the permanent crop.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I like the connection you're making.
You like the connection. So like I would say that Lisbon is a little bit different than I think your experience in Norway, in that we didn't do fast speed rail, but the if you were to take the states and make the comparison between, and you use Norway and Portugal as a state, I think that they both, Portugal and Norway, clearly take a lot of pride in their infrastructure.
Yeah,
and I think from our standpoint, we haven't had a really big infrastructure investment since the Eisenhower administration. The men and women come home from World War II. We build the interstate highway system. That's really the last big infrastructure, really big national infrastructure plan we've had. So that was my take. But I think you had some other interesting things go on in Norway and Denmark that you can really pull on.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of similarities, I think, to Portugal. I mean, you mentioned how clean the cities were, the streets were. I 100% saw that in Oslo. The interesting thing about Oslo was something I learned about the transportation there was, in order to avoid the pollution that usually comes with all the cars in the cities, Oslo actually has built a tunnel underneath the city so that way cars don't drive through the city. And, they make parking really expensive. They actually change the road plans every couple of weeks to kind of further complicate the driving situation. They really discourage cars within Oslo. And so I thought that was a really interesting comparison that you made to Portugal. But then also in Denmark, I think the stereotypical or famous thing about Denmark, or what do you think about when you think about Copenhagen, is bicycles.
And windmills.
And one thing that, or actually not one thing, I saw a lot of things, is I saw a ton of bikes whenever I was in Copenhagen. In fact, right, you think of a normal road, you've got your right-hand lane, at least here in the States, you've got your traffic lights, everything is kind of set up for cars. In Copenhagen, they do the exact same thing for bike lanes. So here in Pittsburgh, we have bike lanes, but in Copenhagen, they take it to the next level where they actually have bike lights set up next to the car lights, which I thought was really, really interesting. So they take their biking a bit more seriously than I would say back home here.
Yeah, it remains to be seen on the profitability of the bikes. That's more of a venture capital. That's a private equity discussion.
Yeah.
I think that the amount of investment that goes in, you can see that they're ahead of us there. Whether it's you talk about high-speed rail. I mean, go look at the state of California. They've been given billions and billions of dollars. I don't think there's any high-speed rail to think of. Like,
not that I can think of.
And, Sacramento to San Diego didn't happen. San Francisco to San Diego didn't happen. You can see the investment side of it. There are a lot of opportunities internationally, but I would imagine that as we look out, right, that means that there's a lot of opportunity here for public infrastructure investments.
Of course, and so kind of bringing it back home. So it sounds like you had a really good experience in Lisbon. If you had to give a grade to the Portugal airport, the Lisbon airport, what would you give that?
A-.
A-, which is really interesting to think about, because when we think, there was a report that came out for 2025 from the American Society of Civil Engineers.
Okay.
And what grade do you think they gave America's infrastructure?
C-.
C. It was C-, and they actually recently got upgraded to C. So kudos to you.
How about that?
On being pretty close there. It actually, at one point was a D-, which is kind of a gray mark on our scorecard.
Not great.
We think about what are the needs for infrastructure within America over the next decade or so. And according to the American Society of Civil Engineering, it's about $3.6 trillion. And the most recent legislation, I think it was the Infrastructure and Jobs Act in 2021. Gave us about $580 billion, which is a good starting point, but that actually expires in 2026. What do you think is the opportunity set for private capital, I would say?
Well, I think I'll just use an example, so the US Open here at Oakmont, you have to, if you're coming from where I live, you got to go through Fort Pitt Tunnel, you're going to go across the Fort Duquesne Bridge, you're going to drive down an interstate highway to the Holton Bridge. And you're going to cross some train tracks.
So a little bit of everything.
So a little bit of everything. And I think we certainly, we need to upgrade a little bit of everything. I think that as we try to become the innovation leader in AI, our electrical grid needs to get upgraded. Yep. Think about what's going on in Texas. It's like that grid's not good enough. And a lot of the jobs are moving there, right? Elon Musk has moved a lot of his company there. Charles Schwab just moved their company there. There are a lot of people moving to Texas, and the grid's not that great.
There's a new stock exchange being opened.
There's a new stock exchange. So you look at all of those things, And you think that's just one example of what we need. I think a massive upgrade to our highway system. We need to upgrade our ports, right? We just Port of Baltimore, I think it was a year ago. It's hard to believe it was a year ago. A container ship just ran over and just destroyed a bridge.
Yeah.
Because it was that they didn't read the tides right, and it was a little bit too high, and you knocked it over. I mean, clearly we have infrastructure that's failing, whether it's potholes, whether it's delays at airports, whether it's the Newark air traffic control situation, which is that airport's not getting an A-
No.
anyone. I think that there's so many examples of it, and the reality is we are working from a position of weakness because of our national debt and our deficit spending. And we're $37 trillion in debt, probably more than that. Now with higher interest rate costs,
Yep.
the public sector, quote unquote, public being state and local governments, federal government, like we can't do those projects anymore. We can't go down to Panama and build the canal.
Right.
We can't go build the highway system. There's just no money for it, right? And the world is voting with their dollars and saying, you're going to have to pay us more for us to lend you money.
Yeah.
The value of the dollar is declining, so the purchasing power declines, right? So I look at that and I say, that's a wonderful opportunity for private capital. Be a solution to that, and much in the way that it is internationally, which is a lot of public-private partnerships, some private-only partnerships that have revenue stream that goes back to the government. To me, that is the opportunity, and we use the example of Oakmont as an example, but all of those things can get improved, and that's a local example here in Pittsburgh. We talked about Texas. But there are look at California, look what happened with their grid, look what happened with the wildfires. Like there are things that are going on around us that we continually need to have improvement on, and I think private capital that's going to run it efficiently like a business, I think it's a wonderful opportunity presented to the private sector, in part because of the indebtedness of sovereign nations.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. And I think as we've kind of spoke about and as we've seen, there's a lot of different engineering priorities between the United States and Europe, both have their strengths, but both that face their challenges. And in either way, there's going to be a funding gap, both at home and abroad, and that's where private capital steps in, which I think offers an opportunity set for both our clients and investors all over the world. And I think that's where we're going to leave it at for today's episode of Hard Hats, Shovels, and Lunch Pails. Jason, thank you for joining me on my first episode at the helm, and I look forward to having you on another episode.
Yeah, the show's in great hands. I look forward to seeing where you take it, and I don't think that we're going to have anything. We will not have a lack of topics to talk about, so I look forward to watching, and all you guys should like and subscribe and watch and see where Sean takes it. So thank you.
Thank you
for having me.